Some urban legends have a kernel of truth to them that only makes them scarier. So today we have a whole slew of government conspiracies and worse that were both very much real and that you should very much know about for your safety. During the height of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, 10 years removed from MKUltra and the illegal experiments performed by the CIA in that project, a new game showed up at arcades over in Portland, Oregon. The game had a plain black cabinet and featured a series of puzzles in different colors and geometric shapes. It didn't really have a name, but it was periodically serviced by different pairs of men in black suits. The game was pretty addictive, and those who played it afterwards tended to have a lot of amnesia. Stories say that at least 2 folks disappeared after playing it, and there's been a lot of other folks that came forward claiming to have been abducted by men in suits after playing. This game, which came to be called Polybius by those who knew of it, borrowing the name of the Greek historian famous for relying on first-hand accounts, disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Take for instance Bobby Feldstein, who claims he was abducted one afternoon after playing the game at Coin Kingdom and experienced a lot of mind-altering side effects. Allegedly, he was led through a series of underground tunnels similar to the tunnels of Portland's Shanghai lore and was found the next day more than 60 miles from his house in the middle of the forest. There was another boy with him apparently, one who rescued him, and there's been many other stories like his. But nowadays, Feldstein gives walking tours around Portland that attempt to authenticate his experience by returning to the former basement of Coin Kingdom. He claims the ordeal of the abduction ruined his life, telling a lot of folks, doing a tour is a way to exorcise my demons on a daily basis. So nowadays, there's a lot of questions around how is this allowed to happen and will it ever happen again? Ever hear about the toxic lady? Gloria Ramirez was an ordinary woman living in Riverside, California with a couple of descendants and a husband. A lot of her friends were like, yeah, she's friendly, she's a jokester, everybody loves her. But this all changed on February 19th of 1994 when Gloria was rushed to General Hospital in Riverside. That night, Gloria was battling a very rapid heartbeat and a drop in pressure. She could hardly breathe, and she also was answering questions in the form of incoherent sentences. Now, to make all of this even more unusual, she was just 31, but she had late-stage cervical cancer and was deteriorating pretty quickly when she got to the ER and passed less than an hour later. But here's the thing, she had a bit of a weird effect on the hospital staff. A lot of folks who treated her suffered from odd symptoms. We're talking fainting, shortness of breath, even temporary paralysis. 5 workers required hospitalization, at least one of whom remained in intensive care for 2 weeks after. So the medical staff, they took care of her. They gave her diazepam, lorazepam, everything to sedate her. And when it became clear that Ramirez was responding poorly to treatment, folks tried to defibrillate her, everything that you're supposed to do. But then they noticed an oily substance covering her body. Other folks noted a fruity, garlic-like odor that they thought was coming from her mouth. So like I mentioned before, the poor thing passed away, and a team wearing hazmat suits performed her autopsy. But they couldn't explain why everybody else had fallen ill. A lot of folks were like, okay, it's mass hysteria. Until the coroner's office found that Ramirez had been trying to treat herself with dimethyl sulfone cream. When exposed to oxygen, this creates a vapor that affects people like poison gas. COINTELPRO, which is in a way a short form for counterintelligence program, was a series of covert and illegal projects conducted between 1956 and 1971 by the FBI that were aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American political organizations that the FBI perceived as subversive. So groups and individuals targeted by the FBI included feminist organizations, the Communist Party, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists in the civil rights and Black Power movements, folks like Martin Luther King Jr., the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, environmentalist and animal rights organizations, independence movements including Puerto Rican independence groups such as the Young Lords and the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, and more. Although the program primarily focused on organizations that were part of the broader New Left, they also targeted white supremacist groups such as the National States Rights Party and a more popular group that you'd normally list off by their initials, but we shouldn't say that, the white guys in the pointy white outfits. You know what I mean. The FBI has used covert operations against domestic political groups since its inception. However, covert operations under the official COINTELPRO label took place between 1956 to 71. However, the official chronology of the program is kind of a subject of debate. According to a Senate investigation, if this had been a short-lived abomination, the thorny problems of motivation, techniques, control presented might be safely relegated to history. But seeing as this organization existed for years on a quiet basis before the formal programs were instituted, and more significantly, these types of activities might actually continue to today under the rubric of investigation. A lot of the tactics used are alleged to have seen continued use, including discrediting targets through psychological warfare, warfare, smearing individuals and groups using forged documents, and by planting false reports in the media, harassment, wrongful imprisonment, illegal violence, and, well, taking them out. According to a Senate report, the FBI's motivation was protecting national security, preventing violence, maintaining the existing social and political order. FBI Director Hoover at the time issued directives governing this whole organization, ordering FBI agents to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of these movements and especially their leaders. Under Hoover, the official in charge of all of this was Assistant Director William C. Sullivan. Now, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy personally authorized a lot of these programs, giving written approval for limited wiretapping of Martin Luther King's phones on a trial basis for a month or so. Hoover extended the clearance so his men were unshackled to look for evidence in any areas of King's life that they deemed worthy. Whew, here's another historical doozy, and that's the start of the Tuskegee syphilis study in 1932. So black men in Alabama volunteered to undergo special treatment for bad human redness. They had seen signs in their neighborhood claiming that the government and the county health department would treat them, but what they didn't know was that they were actually signing up to be part of a study of untreated syphilis amongst black men. The purpose of the study was to observe the effects of the disease when untreated, though by the end of the study, medical advancements meant it was entirely treatable. Now, these men were not informed of the nature of the experiment, and more than 100 died as a result. There were 399 men who were diagnosed with syphilis and made to believe they would receive treatment for any symptoms of their bad fluids. Doctors in the area were told not to treat those in the study. Just examine them, observe them. These men were initially told that the experiment was only going to be like 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years. After funding for the treatment was lost, the study was continued without informing the men that they would never be treated. None of the infected men were ever treated with penicillin, despite the fact that by 1947, the antibiotic was widely available and was the standard treatment for syphilis. The study continued under numerous public health service supervisors until 1972, when a leak to the press resulted in its termination on November 16th of that year. Its revelation led to the 1979 Belmont Report and to the establishment of the Office for Human Research Protections, and federal laws and regulations requiring institutional review boards for the protection of human subjects in studies. Now, that whole office manages this responsibility within the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It wasn't until May 16th of 1997 when President at the time, Bill Clinton, formally apologized on behalf of the United States to the victims of the study, calling it shameful, racist, and so forth. And in our final legend for today, did you know that there's actual alien debris buried in the desert of New Mexico? The Atari video game, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, failed so miserably that the company buried unsold cartridges in a desert landfill. Wait, well, what do you think I meant? Real aliens in New Mexico? We would have opened today with this if I was talking about bodies, folks. So this whole burial was a mass burial of a lot of unsold video game cartridges, consoles, and computers in a landfill site, and this was all done by Atari in 1983. Since the burial was first reported, there were a lot of doubts as to, really? Did somebody actually bury a bunch of video games in the desert? And for a while, and for a very long while, it was just an urban legend. This was like a cultural icon and a reminder of the video game crash of 1983. It was the end result of a disastrous fiscal year which saw Atari being sold off by its parent company, Warner Communications. And though it was believed that millions of copies of this game were buried, officials later verified that it was around 700,000. And it was various games, but E.T. was one of them. Well, in 2014, Fuel Industries, Microsoft, and others worked with the New Mexico government to excavate the site as part of a documentary, Atari Game Over. And on April 26 of 2014, well, the excavation revealed a lot of discarded games and hardware. Now, it wasn't everything that was found. About 1,300 cartridges were recovered, with a portion given for curation to museums, and then the rest auctioned to raise money for a museum to commemorate the burial. And the documentary, which features all of this, came out in November of that year. Well, that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident ookie spooky girly. See ya!